Hey guys, it's me. Who I am is not important. I'm an unknown person and this is my first attempt at streaming, so hey, whatever, let's get to it. Switching over to a large map primarily because space tends to feel really cramped on a medium map, especially as you get later into the game. Just perusing the map, making sure where I would like to place the base, because you have to make sure you have easy access to at least a little bit of stone, coal, and iron, because you have a very limited amount of money in the beginning, and if you have to go a long way to get them, it can be a real pain in the butt. So pretty happy with this one, so we'll just go with it. Drop the base down somewhere in the middle, close enough to stuff, but still having room to build buildings around it. A little hiccup there. One of the big changes in the recent update used to be assigning workers was done with the right mouse button as far as assigning tasks, and now the right mouse button only controls the camera, so it flips the camera around when you don't expect it sometimes. You get used to it. The first goal in general, you have to get 15 wood so you can build a house and start getting more workers. I've turned off the tutorial because I've played through several times, so I don't need to be walked through the first couple of steps of what you need to do. So, it's just the way I play. Anyway, just going to be building up a little bit more wood. Need to build a lumber mill so you can start getting planks and start upgrading to the more advanced types of buildings. There's still a limited tech tree in this game, but it is alpha and it will be expanding as the versions keep updating. In order to build the lumber mill, you have to get 10 stone, so even though they're having to walk quite a ways to get the stone, you don't have to get that much of it, so just gonna send them tromping off into the distance. There's a piece of stone I could have got there with those closer. I'll probably go back and get that later. Anyway, yeah, my house is unhappy with me. It's okay. I gotta get some grain for it just to make it happy temporarily. Footpads in general let workers run faster, so they get to places quicker. However, it does prevent you from building on those spots unless you rip up the footpaths later, which can be annoying, so I don't use them too much, but in the beginning it helps speed up your game because it lets the workers get to and from resources faster until you really get an infrastructure built. The downside is each square of footpath takes a log, so you don't have many resources to start with, so you can't build many footpaths. Just assign a little piece of grain to the house, just to get it happy, throw some food at them. I wouldn't want to chew on raw grain, but hey, you know what? They seem happy with it. Hey, 1 gold. Building footpaths out just to make sure workers actually can able to get back to the base quickly in all the directions. As more logs come in, I'm expanding the footpath network, although all of these will be ripped up here shortly, trust me, as buildings tend to cluster around the base anyway, at least until late game. Come on, give me some logs. Okay, there we go. Haha. So now at this point I'm just waiting on my little stone workers to get me 10 stone and enough boards to make the lumber mill so I can start making planks. And once I get planks, I can make chutes, and then workers won't have to carry resources all the way back to the base, and they'll just be able to drop them on chutes and slide them in happily. Hey, 10 stone. Unfortunately, lumber mill also takes 20 wood, so I gotta wait for it to develop 20 wood as well. But with 3 workers getting it, it's getting there pretty fast. We already have 16. The early game of this does tend to be very slow as you're waiting on the resources to get the first couple of things running. Then once you get going, it speeds up quite a bit as far as what's going on. Out of workers, each building takes up 1 worker slot, so I had to delete a worker to free up room for the lumber mill. But take and build more houses to get more workers anyway. I could have built a house rather than deleting one, but that would have used up the 15 wood that the lumber mill would have required in building the extra house. Then I would have had to wait for more wood, so you know what, just kill a worker, or delete a worker, send him back home, whatever you want to call it. I don't really kill him, but click on him and hit delete. We'll call it killing him. Yay, shoots. Each chute takes a plank, and each plank takes 2 logs, so it does take a little bit longer to build up the resources to start building chutes, but chutes are your friend. They are so much more efficient to have workers just drop things onto a chute and have them slide all the way back to base rather than having them walk each individual piece back one at a time. Now, before you can get conveyor belts that can carry intermediate items, most produced items cannot travel on a chute, so the only thing you can do is put an individual worker between the two buildings and have them act as a single insert, or just grabbing out of one building and putting it into the next. Usually he doesn't even have to move. This one's hopping up and down 2 squares because they tend to try and insert into the center of a building if they have the movement room to. So he's just dropping planks into the base. So what I'm putting a market down, which anything you bring to the market will be distributed to all the houses in range rather than having to supply the houses individually. So now I have my worker bringing grain to the market, and then the market's going to hand out that grain to all the houses I build as long as they're within range of that market, which you can see by the yellow highlight whenever I place the second house. So now the market is giving grain to both of those houses, and it's a shorter trip for that one worker to take the grain to the market. So at this point I have to start worrying about an income in general, which once you have a few houses and you can upgrade the houses to level 2, and the main reason you want to do that is they can consume stone as an input. Right now they only consume grain, they only care about food. But grain only gives you 1 gold apiece, and it takes a really long time to build up any money that way. So the best thing to do is, once you have some planks in store and have a section of stone you can get to, use the chutes and just start ferrying the stone straight into the houses. Now, the reason why you want to go straight into the houses rather than into the market is because the market takes time to sell to the houses. That only sells it to them when they need to keep them happy. However, if you put the stone straight into the houses themselves, they'll essentially buy it immediately and consume it much faster. So it's a way to turn resources into money directly without having to wait for the market to sell them. And in general, that's your direct source of income in the early game, is pouring stone into as many houses as you can build. Generally, 5-6 houses is sufficient in the early game until you start getting other buildings. And then once you start getting a later game, you move on to more advanced resources you can put into houses, like forged iron and other items like that, which will make you significantly more money. But in the early game, you have to get money to start terraforming and start building, because a lot of things revolve around requiring the cash as well as the resources to do something. So you have to have a source of income, and income can be severely limited once you start getting your economy going, because producing things will start costing money, and if you don't have an income, you can't. Basically, your whole economy grinds to a halt and gets very, very slow to advance. So the 1 piece of stone over there, since it's a shorter trip, rather than have my workers run all the way, I'm going to have them go there to the 1 piece of stone on the left, to where they can grab stone from it and make the shorter trip. As soon as I have some planks built up, I'm going to build a chute to it, so they don't actually have to walk the stone back to the houses, and it'll just basically transport itself, which is very useful. The downside to chutes is, in general, chutes can only handle raw input items, like stuff that's harvested off the ground, stone, iron, logs, wheat. Stuff like how wheat rolls down a chute. I don't know, but hey, game physics. But that lets you move early items around easily. Then later on, you can get crafting and build actual conveyor belts, which will carry anything you want. But chutes are an interesting set of gameplay mechanics, which have their own benefits even once you unlock the later stuff, because chutes do a better job of sorting things automatically, and I'll go into that later once I start building more complicated chute systems. But you'll see it here in a second whenever I actually start building up the chutes. One downside of the chutes is they can only travel down even terrain. So if you're going down a hill and the hill's like at a 45-degree angle, it can't go down that on the side. It has to be an even downslope it's heading straight towards, and you'll see whenever I clear the ground here in a second, trying to building a footpath so they run faster and bring the stone back. But you see how those hills are 45 degrees right there. They're not hitting the edge straight on to go down the hill, and the chute can't go down that because that's just the way the game is programmed. Now I guess it makes sense, makes it more difficult. So right now I just have the single house upgraded to level 2, so that's the only one that can accept stone. As I build up more, houses consume planks whenever you make the upgrade itself, so you have to have 5 planks per house. It might be 10 planks, I have to look at it, but you have to have a number of planks per house to make the upgrade into level 2. Then once you're level 2, you can just start feeding it stone, and that's fine. So right now, every stone they carry back is getting me 2 gold, and as I get gold, you also have to have, there it is, 5 planks and 10 gold to make an upgrade into level 2. So now I have 2 houses that can consume stone, so I can start consuming it faster. Then this is where the system starts building on itself. As you get more things supporting themselves, you can start buying more things to buy more things, and it becomes a growth cycle. And then you get to a nice level steady state of 5 or 6 houses consuming pretty much as much stone as you can throw at them, and you have a pretty consistent income, and you can start churning your way into the research tree. Because if you try to go into research too early, your economy will grind to a halt because you just don't have the income to support it. So here's where I'm placing the chutes, and I leveled out the terrain to where it goes straight down the hill rather than those 45-degree angles, getting the workers out of the way because they prevent you placing the chutes down. And with the chute system being able to go in like that, you don't need as many workers, because the number of workers was just to be able to get enough throughput over the distance. With a footpath under them, you can actually have 3 workers working in a get back here. He was trying to go the long way around because these workers are stupid. With a footpath, you can actually have 3 workers working in a single square, whereas if you don't have a footpath there, you can only have a single worker working in a single square, so that really speeds up your stone processing. And right now they're just rolling stone down the chute, and as it goes down the chute, there's one section of chute which goes straight at the end of it, then there's an option to turn right. The stone will attempt to go straight first, and if that house will accept it, it just rolls right into it. If not, it makes the turn. And then the same thing as the chutes go to the right, it will attempt to go straight and actually fill up the third house. Then once the third house stops accepting them, it'll start backing up and eventually fill up the second house. Chutes basically want to travel straight, and then they attempt to turn. But you can use that to create a sorting system to where basically items try to go into a building, and if the building won't accept them for whatever reason, then they divert and keep going, and you can supply multiple things with a single chute. And it basically just rolls on down the line to whoever wants to accept it. It makes it kind of easy, but you have to, whenever you're placing the chutes, you press tab, and it'll move you into precision placing mode, which is what I did there. And then you can tell the chute exactly how you want it to move. The reason why I'm making the little dog leg out is to where the straight path attempts to go into the house, and then the bypass goes around to dump the excess stone into the base. So otherwise, the stone would just bypass the house going straight and go into the base, and would never attempt to go into the house, so it wouldn't supply it. So that's why I did the little dog leg there, to where the straight option on the chute was going into the house. And you have to delete the footpaths in order to change the terrain level, which is annoying, but, makes it a little more of a challenge. Once again, I was out of planks right here, so I had to let them build up another plank. 1 plank per chute is what it costs to build them. So now that I have the stone doing this, basically it attempts to feed stone into... Actually, it's skipping the second house. I'm going to have to go back and fix that. But it attempts to feed stone into each house, and then if none of the houses will accept it, it just drops it into the base because you need stone for building things. So this, using a chute system like that, allows you to feed multiple buildings and pick the order in which it tries to feed each building and then bypasses. And you can make chute systems as complicated as you like. The downside is chutes in general only flow downhill. On level terrain, they will travel forward an indefinite amount, which, it's not physics, but game, whatever. But it will not travel uphill, and items will start to jam. And that's where conveyor belts come in, because they can move things uphill under power, but chutes can't. But chutes can be useful in other ways and more advanced sorting techniques, which you kind of run into later, but you use them where you need them and use belts where you have to. Because the other advantage chutes have is belts have a fixed speed, which is very low at first until you get to the more advanced belts, whereas chutes just keep speeding up over time and can actually get very, very fast, depending on how efficient you make your system. As I build up a store of planks and stone, I was able to build a workshop, which is one of the main production buildings you used to make a lot of the various things you need in your base right now. And they just mined out all that stone, so I have to terraform up the rocks out of the water so they can get to them, which is really expensive, but because I was making money off the stone, I was able to afford it. Normally you couldn't terraform large blocks of terrain early in the game because you don't have the income to it, but using the option to dump stone into houses like this for income, it gives you just enough to be able to do what you need and support expanding without spending too much time, just sitting there waiting on them to make little bits of money here and there. So now that I have my workshop and my houses, and basically have a nice low level of income built up, and I'll expand to more houses and fix that second house later. But yeah, for now it works, and I've got a decent amount of income. I can start researching into the research tree, which you have to build a schoolhouse for. But in order to build a schoolhouse, this is where you start having to automate a production chain, because schoolhouses not only require the thing they're researching, in the beginning it's going to be wheat so I can build farms, but they also require paper as a research material, or later on you can make books or enchanted books, but for now it's just paper. It's real easy. And paper itself is made in lumber mills, so you have to build a lumber mill which feeds the school. So you have to have a second set of workers feeding wood to the lumber mill to feed the school. So you start building up a production chain of buildings to get the final thing that you want. The chains get more complicated as the items get bigger and require more inputs. Then those inputs require inputs, and well, you can see how things get bigger, and as the production chains get bigger. And the downside is there's very limited room in the way the game's grid system is laid out, and things get very cramped very quickly. And here I'm building my chute system to run logs into the lumber mill. However, making paper out of wood isn't just wood, also requires water, which if I had a lot of money, I could terraform the river over to get to this building, but this early in the game, it's easier just to delete the buildings and physically move them to the water themselves, because there's no disadvantage of where the buildings are physically placed, other than convenience of needing to get items around. But in this instance, it's easier just to build the lumber mill next to the water, so it gets its own source of water. The paper recipe isn't actually unlocked until the school is built, so I had to build the school and then set the lumber mill to produce paper, because it's a requirement thing. This is where I'm using the worker as basically as an inserter. When you have conveyor belts, you can just tell it to move the paper on a belt, but for now you have to basically burn labor and have a worker standing there handing items from one building to the next. There is no direct insertion of a building just feeding items into the next one. That's discussed by the developer. He may add that. I don't know. But for now, you have to have a worker until you get conveyor belts to do it for you, which is fine. I mean, build houses, upgrade them, and you have to get a bigger worker force. Like now I only have 17 out of 24 worker force being used, so I have extra workers that I can build. But every building that you build also consumes a worker in general. So sometimes you have to delete a worker out of the world to add a building, and you kind of have to balance what your workers themselves are actually doing as compared to you want to expand your base and build more buildings. Well, that takes up more workers. Later in the game, workers themselves aren't going to be running around, and you have other things doing the work for you, so the workforce is more used up in running the buildings rather than having actual guys running around carrying items. Rather than making the long trip to bring the wheat back there himself, I just build a little chute system, and he can drop the wheat right onto the chute, and it rolls all the way down to the school. Anyway, that's pretty much what I have for this initial episode. We'll see how it goes, and I'll probably finish out this game into the research tree that they have, and hope you guys like it.